I now get the privilege of introducing Nadia Myre, somebody who I've known for some time. Nadia Myre is a renowned interdisciplinary artist and Algonquin member of the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabeg First Nation, as exemplified by seminal works such as Indian Act in 2002, an incredible piece, The Scar Project from 2005 to 2013, and A Casual Reconstruction in 2015. Myre explores the politics of belonging by positioning it within a framework of Indigenous resistance and resilience. Extensively exhibited and collected, Myre's work can be found in the collections of the National Gallery of Canada, Smithsonian Institute, National Museum of the American Indian, Caddist Foundation, Musée National des Beaux-Arts in Quebec, Art Gallery of Ontario, Montreal Art Contemporary, and Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Myre is the recipient of numerous commissions and awards, notably the Louis Comteau Prize, the Sobey in 2021, the Sobey Art Award in 2014, and for Canadian artists under 40, well, it was then, and in 2019 was inducted into the Order of Arts and Letters of Quebec. So thank you so much, Nadia, for being here and sharing with us, and please welcome Nadia to the stage to share.
I don't know which mic. Yeah. All right. I'll try this mic. This mic? Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for coming, for being here, and for such a beautiful opening, both as a welcome to territory and as a situation of understanding that we all have learning to do, and we're always in a constant state of learning, and that's pretty much how I approach my practice. I just threw this in here to kind of situate my own work and some of the things that are driving me forward, and this is an image of the Indian Act that Tania just was speaking about, and so I made this in between 2000 and 2002, and what I was really thinking about was thinking about my identity as an Indigenous person, and how that was controlled by the Indian Act, and how I was separated from my culture, and how my mother was separated from her culture, and how hundreds and thousands of people were separated because of these assimilation policies within the Indian Act, and then wanting to kind of beat over it as an act of healing, as an act of recovery, as a political kind of motion, and getting people involved to beat over it with me over a period of 2 years. Basically just replacing the words of the law of the Indian Act, which is still ongoing, right? Still a legal document that has had many amendments over the years, but there's still clauses in there where if you're in Saskatchewan, you have to go see the Indian agent to sell your wheat. They're not all in effect, but they're still there. And of course there's reasons why we still have it. In part, it's one of the few things that protects Indigenous people to territory. And so, this citation intensive that you're here for, that you're participating in, is incredibly important. And to that, I remember my colleague, Rickards, who was talking about how it was really, really, like, one of the most political things you could do was actually be an Indigenous person in territory, in your community, right? Like, that was, because in one way what the Indian Act did was everything to kind of like separate people from the land, right? And so in one way that's where I come from, but also I come from a lineage that has been separated. I don't have community to call home in Kitigan-Zibi. I am on the ban list, but I don't have family there. I have second cousins that I've met maybe once or twice, but no real family connection. I don't have a grandmother that I met, and I have my mother, but she either didn't have her mother and didn't have her grandmother. So the work that I've been doing has been a lot of recovery. And because we're in a university, I thought it might be good to also just show works that weren't finished. I wanted to show some of the things that I've been thinking about since I booted over the Indian Act. And not all of it's here, because there's a whole work of performance and video. But for the most part, you know, I'm really interested in material investigation as a way to kind of think about identity and my relationship and learn. I'm always in a constant state of learning. Thinking about the relational practice as a decolonial methodology, and also, like the Indian Act, thinking about the transcultural ideas between, you know, what a legal document is, and how those kind of objects of kind of translation between cultures happen. So, and also accentuating Indigenous placekeeping through public art practice and public art competitions. Some of the work is just kind of tests of ideas and things that I'm thinking about in studio. Some of it's finished, and here we go. So for the last few years, I've been in studio just kind of exploring, working with these ceramic pieces. I've been weaving them, and none of these are finished works, but thinking about how to weave them, how to install them, how to grout them, how to create them texture. I'm really interested in this kind of like working with, you know, wampum as a reference, because it's an important part of my people, the Anishinaabe people, but then doing other things with those. So in 2018, I was invited to do an exhibition in Glasgow, and so I was really kind of thinking about the relationship between Indigenous people and what was going on in Glasgow, and how you know, the Scottish, in a period of 3 generations, went from being very, very poor to owning the banks in Europe, basically. In part because of this golden triangle, right? They had the boats, they would pick up slaves, they would bring them to the New World, they would have these cash crops, including tobacco and sugar and cotton, and then kind of repeat this cycle over and over again. So I was thinking about this relationship of, well, what did they, you know, where is that kind of transcultural moment? And these are some beaded baskets out of these ceramic pipes. These ones are replicas, but what happened is I had found these ceramic pipes, and the ceramic pipes were actually tobacco pipes. And so I started to think about tobacco and that relationship. My slides are out of order, but again in the studio, thinking about fragment, thinking about archaeology, and these are some of like what these kind of small little pipes that I'd found in the Thames were, and how to kind of use them in different ways. And I wanted to kind of talk about also the importance of mystery. A lot of the time I might have an idea, but what happens is, this is part of life, but for me anyway, what happens is, you know, I get a piece of information and it kind of mulls in me, and then something happens, and then that kind of becomes a whole line of avenue of exploration. And in one way, finding these kind of like little ceramic pipes has opened up my practice to think about beading on a larger scale, which is something that I've been trying to do for many years. But also, yeah, thinking about the individual and the kind of collective, and the you know, just the stumbling upon things is really important in my practice. I don't know if I have the video with this, but part of the other practice is kind of working with people in a very relational way. So this work, which is called the decolonial gesture, or no, casual reconstruction rather, I was in Mi'kmaq territory having a conversation with my friend Michelle about what it meant to be Indigenous, because I didn't really grow up being Indigenous. I grew up in Montreal, and you know, my mother didn't really find her Indigenous roots and her family, or parts of her family, until '82, basically. And so in one way, we were talking about, well, and he had a similar story. He was also, you know, he knew he was Indian, but it was denied in the family. And so we were talking about, like, what are our cultural markers, both as Native people, but also as Quebecois, and also speaking English. And we decided to have a conversation that I recorded. Oh, I don't know if this, let me see. Oh, I do need audio. Thank you.
Freddie's got it.
Go back. Let me just see, make sure that I have audio up here.
Excuse me. We're connected to the, are you through HDMI right now?
Yeah,
Or
I'm through the HDMI
so it
cable.
should work. You want to test it now?
Yeah. Show me? Here? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Good.
Let's check it out.
Let's try that.
No audio. HDMI cable. Why is this not working? Oh, hey.
I hope it doesn't blast.
I'm just trying to right now center projected.
So one of the things that I did with this is after the conversation, I turned it into a script. And for the opening, I had non-Indigenous people read the conversation that we had around a kitchen table, basically. And it was important for me that non-Indigenous people kind of participate in the reading of what it was that we were trying to, like, discover, uncover, discuss about, you know, our relationship to identity, in part to create that unsettling that you were speaking about, and also to kind of bring a bridging, because in this place where I was invited at Carleton-sur-Mer, along the east coast, you know, the Gaspé Peninsula, it's like Indigenous community, French community, Acadian community, Indigenous community, French, and it's all peppered along the coast. And I'd had the privilege of being out there a few years before because France Trepanier had invited me for kind of a big gathering. And what I learned while I was out there was that there was a lot of racism. Even though, you know, there were only one or two schools and everybody went to the same school, at the same time there was a lot of racism between the communities and between the people. And so there's a situation where people are all in grade school together, but by the time they get to high school, they're living in complete different worlds. And part of this work was to try and kind of, I wouldn't say repair, but unsettle that from the inside out.
Sorry, Nadia, we're not getting the audio.
It's okay. Basically, it's just part of the script. And, you know, Michelle's speaking about what it means for him to be Indigenous, and I basically say, well, for me, it's an active choice, and for him, it wasn't. And I think I can say that because I'm fairly white-skinned and pass, and also I don't necessarily have the family connection that, you know, everyone else around the table, but everyone else around the table doesn't either, you know? Some people do and some people don't. And so this piece is performed and re-performed. Let me see if I can, over a series of many years. As I keep trying to, like, unsettle from the inside out, I guess, is one way to think about it. And then this piece actually becomes a central other piece in a theater production play that I was writing with my friend Johanna Nutter. And so, there's some weird slides about that too. And then Zoom happened, so there was a lot of investigation about how to turn this theater piece into both on-screen and in-theater performance. Not Zoom happened, sorry, the pandemic. But all I remember is Zoom.
It was a plague of its own.
And then we finally had an opportunity to stage the work at the Myre a couple of years ago in Montreal. And it was kind of a simultaneous, kind of in theater with just a few people, and then broadcast at the same time to create kind of this interesting dual theater performance. And Johanna is a settler, and I'm kind of like the Indian, so the conversation is about that, basically. I think these are where the pipes are. Maybe I should have started with this. But quite a few years ago, I was in London traveling for the first time in a long time since I was very little. And I'd found these kind of those ceramic pipes just scattered in the rocks. And I didn't really know what they were at the time, but I'd asked somebody, and she'd given me this pipe down here to say if this is what they are. They're tobacco pipes from, 18th, 19th century. And I was amazed because they had like these holes running through them. And so it's inspired a whole line of work of what, I thought I was finding beads on the shore in London. And I collected a bunch and walked away with it. And then, later was like, well, what would it look like to bead these? And thinking a lot about also like how the influence of culture goes both ways. So, there's this moment of Europeans coming to North America and loving tobacco and going back home with it and building a whole industry around it. And that also it was kind of like in every aspect of culture, because it was understood as a remedy for all things, even for drowning. I won't go there, but there is a tool to use to help somebody revive them from drowning with smoke. And maybe I will say it. No, I won't say it. Well, that's where the expression of blowing smoke up one's ass comes from. And so if you ever go to the Welcome Museum, there's actually a sort of like, I don't know what that tool is called to make smoke, but yeah, and then you put a cigarette at the end of it. Interestingly. So, I don't know, but that space where culture comes together is really fascinating in some degree. And, on the flip side, I mean, some of the things I learned is that, the breastplates in Cree territory, like, I had heard that actually a lot of those long bone pipes were commissioned by commissioned by Indigenous people to European manufacturers because they were just so beautiful and they wanted them to be, part of the regalia. So it's going both ways. Back to Glasgow, so earlier we saw the basket, and in the back was this blue and white, basically a toile de jouy, which was kind of talking about the relationship of tobacco and some of the stories behind tobacco to the Scottish people, basically. So there's top hats, and then there's also this Tobacco Baron's house, which happens to be the Glasgow Contemporary Art Museum right now. But that was all built on the wealth of tobacco. I'm not going to go into all the stories, but there's a few stories in there. And so when I think about citation or a site and, performing my Indigenous understandings, especially, I think, outside of Canada, internationally, I start to think about like the larger kind of implications of trade and roots and kind of people coming together. It's all there in the Indian Act as like a first kind of seed. And then, you know, here in Venice, well, what was Venice doing? They were at the height. They were the first printing press for all of Europe. So they were disseminating all of the information about what was going on, and, you know, what was here in this place. And they were also making beads. And what were the beads? Well, the beads were systems of trade. They were kind of things that you could exchange for, but they were also ballast in these ships. So they all have these kind of like dual relationships. And so again, thinking about, you know, trade and arrivals, and so here's like maybe one of Columbus's ships, and, you know, the famous kind of fort of Hochelaga, meeting some tobacco and sky women falling. So these kind of like larger creation stories, you know, Christ versus sky women falling to create the world here. And again, also mixing kind of like different understandings. And we started with like this beautiful opening of, you know, this welcome to this place, which has food, which has air, which has everything we need, right? Water. And so in the middle, there's this heart, and you can see there's some flowers, and then it's kind of like interspersed within this grid of a different type of mapping, which doesn't necessarily come from here. This is a public art piece that I competed for, but I thought it would be interesting to show. I didn't win it, but again, I was thinking about the relationship between Scottish settler culture and Indigenous peoples, and this moment of like, there's a famous brooch called the Luckin Booth. I don't know if people know about it, but it's, yeah, so it's two hearts, right? And they come together, and when the Scottish came, they offered this as trade silver and trade jewelry to Indigenous people, and they said, let us be like two hearts, let us be like brethren to each other, you know, we'll be, you know, we'll be living together, right, as in a common kind of understanding. And so I always thought that was a kind of beautiful idea. And I don't know if there's a lot of kind of people who make beadwork in the room, I know. But one of the thoughts I always wondered about is, well, where did our heart come from? I know we talk about the heart, and we talk about it coming from, you know, the heartberry, the strawberry, but then we also have this double heart motif. And I'm curious if there's like this relationship of, did we see the brooch, and then did we kind of like also kind of make this relationship between brothers, or, you know, between two cultures coming together. And on the same token, I mean, this brooch also changes because we have Iroquois. I'm not Iroquois, but I am from woodland area, and so, you know, the Iroquois were very famous metal makers, and changed a lot of these motifs to their own, right? So there's this kind of flowing of what the symbols are looking like. So my idea was to put this big brooch on a building, but that didn't work. This one did work. This is in Paris at the Canadian Embassy, and it goes back to those ceramic pipe beads that that I'd found, and thinking about, yeah, trade, thinking about also about like the founding culture, the founding peoples, right, in Canada, and so I created this skin out of these beads that's all woven and then kind of wrapped around this tree. In the beginning, the tree only had three kind of like, I don't know what that part of the tree, 3 bases, but I was asked to make 4. Here's some images of how that work came about. And some other work in Ottawa for the Pimisi Station for the light rail construction that happened in Le Breton Flats. And also in Montreal, I mean, it kind of becomes a commemoration piece, but that wasn't the call. But this is kind of thinking about 1701 and the Great Peace in Montreal, and all the nations who came together in August to sign the Great Peace, and their dotems, you know, they were represented by dotems, and so this is kind of what that becomes. And it's all cast in bronze. And here's another work that I wasn't successful in winning, but it was for Toronto. I was thinking about the dish with one spoon, and how, especially in Toronto, like, well, these ideas get old all of a sudden because the conversation is always changing. So that's one thing that I really love. But when I was in Vancouver many years ago, I remember seeing kind of like a pilot of a play, and they started with the opening of The Dish with One Spoon, and I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world to be in Vancouver and to have kind of a welcoming from out east as a way to pitch a play. And that stuck with me, and so I was trying to kind of bring more space and thinking around what is the dish with one spoon. And in the Woodlands, it's, you know, it's basically a metaphor of, you know, we all have one dish, which is this place, and one spoon, which we eat from this place. And so we will share this place together. And here's some more kind of work that I've been doing with these ceramic pieces, and then kind of finding another opportunity to explore the dish with one spoon for another commission. And most recently, I mean, I'd always wanted to work with the Smithsonian collection, but I haven't had a chance to. So I basically pillaged these from their website, and it was basically in reaction and in comment to the mounds that were found of children around the residential schools. And at the same time, you know, going back to the first kind of like, what is Canada, you know, French, English, Indigenous, what does that look like? What does that mean? I created this short film. This work is called Tethered, and it's a film loop. And that's just an excerpt of it. I'll talk about this. I was invited for a commission in Edinburgh last summer, and I've been interested in writing more and more, and I had been doing some research around Indigenous storytelling. And so I created this outside kind of public work for hoarding. I think there's 7 or 8 pieces in all, but I didn't have a camera wide enough. And I don't know where that video is of me doing this. But one of the interesting things that happens for me is like I'm researching one thing and another thing kind of like lands in my lap. And so for this work, I was in Edinburgh. I was thinking about stories. I went to the library at Concordia, and I found like a book that had this orange spine, and it said Tales of Nanabojo. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I picked it, and I don't know if I picked it because it was orange or because it had Tales of Nanabojo. And then I kind of flipped open, and it was written by a woman named Dorothy Reed. And in the book, the oddest thing was that there was like this piece of paper that was obviously cut out, that was actually a cardstock that was stuck into the book, and it was a biography about Dorothy. And basically, Dorothy had emigrated from Edinburgh to Thunder Bay. And she became like a librarian, and she had a really beautiful connection to nature. She lived outside, and she began reading these kind of like, she began a program of weekly storytelling around Indigenous stories. And then actually began doing weekly radios with the CBC for a couple of years, and that turned into a book, and then that turned into a record. And I was trying to make a connection between Edinburgh and you know, the Woodland area. And I found the book, and I met somebody out in BC who had a copy of the record. He shipped it for me to Montreal so I could digitize it. But I never used that material because it just didn't feel right. Instead, I, you know, worked around it. Creating my own poetry. But one of the things that happened out of that was I grew up with the story that my grandmother was actually a banjo player and used to go down to Toronto, actually lived in Toronto and played at the Gladstone every week. And that's all I knew. And I'd been looking for information about my grandmother for a really long time. And so it was from this research, actually, that I found a record. I don't know how to put it on here, it's on SoundCloud. And I had the record expedited, and then I played a song, and I don't even know if it's my grandma, actually, but it's her stage name, Rita Starr. And so I'm claiming it, that it is. I think it is, because it's part of the story that I have, that she was down in Tennessee. And I'll try and find the song, or maybe I could, would one of the texts come up for a minute? Maybe we can do a quick search. Can, like a SoundCloud search for, oh yeah. I don't know that I have it. I don't have it as a quick link, but.
You can try and line it up for the little break after too. But
Is it here? Would I go in here?
SoundCloud, yeah.
Can I go like that? No. Okay, we'll try for later. Anyway,
I'll get it running.
thank you.
Yeah.
So the song is, the song really spoke to me. I found it last year, and it spoke to me, and we'll hear it later. And it's a really long story because I've always wanted to sing, but I never was able to remember words. And so I feel like this is gifted from my grandmother to me. And in thinking about that gift, I'm going back to works that are still in the studio, but I've been making these large kind of sunsets, or I don't know, sunscapes, out of the ceramic beads that I'm still working with, and kind of connecting those to my family lineage. So this one is after Rita, my grandmother. And this one's after my mom, Lorraine. And they're not great photos because they're not installed in a beautiful white cube yet, but I thought I would show them because they're still on the loom. And kind of a detail. And maybe I'll show it like this, but I think I have a little video. Is this a video?
Because like this, you're not only with the image of the sunset, but also with the reflection on.
I'm still not sure how I'm showing this, whether it's like displayed like a painting or like a sculpture or is. That's where I am. That's my grandma. All right. Thank you.